Yes, Richard, I'll do that now. And that was Maya pressing record. So that means we're underway.
Great. Okay. I've just got to get rid of a message from Zoom. Okay, so thanks everyone for joining us. So this webinar, as I'm sure you're all aware, is the intention is to explore some of the outputs from the digital storytelling about food growing project, which has been ongoing for the past a year or so. There is currently an open university course live online on grassroots storytelling, so I'd encourage everybody to explore that after this session. Today we're going to be looking at some of the takeaway messages from the project so far. The project is a result of a collaboration between a number of organizations, the Open University, the Cobra Collective, Capital Growth, the Reading International Solidarity Centre, and several garden participants who've already engaged in the digital storytelling program. So far, there have been 2 cohorts of storytellers that have gone through this process, and the project is continuing to refine and expand the content with the intention of leaving a really well-designed and participant-led piece of online learning opportunity for posterity. So today, aside from exploring those themes, we're going to be thinking about how digital storytelling can be used to promote our work. So obviously, digital storytelling is about communication. That can be used in a number of important ways. We engage new participants in this way. We make a case for funders and local councils and other relevant stakeholders, and it assists us in monitoring and evaluation, and can help us to get more funding for our work. So it's a really important piece of work, and I'm really glad to have been invited to chair this session, where we're going to be exploring some of these themes, and also doing some brief how-tos on how you can do some digital storytelling of your own. So stay tuned for that later in the webinar. Right now, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Lev, who's going to give you a bit more of an introduction into the digital storytelling and food growing project. Lev, over to you.
Okay, thanks for this opportunity. Thanks in particular to Sustain, Capital Growth Program, and the Social Farms and Gardens for hosting this webinar about our research project on community food growing. This is funded by the COVID-19 Rapid Response Program of the UK Research Councils, in particular the Arts and Humanities Research Council. Our project initially drew storytellers through our partnerships with those organizations and Food for Families in Reading. Now it draws many more from around the country. Here I'd like to explain our key terms and initial findings. In our project, practitioners create their own visual stories with assistance from the Cobra Collective tutors. Hence, we call this grassroots visual storytelling, by contrast with professional films, which may be available on similar topics. We speak about community food growing initiatives rather than community gardens as such, because some of them mainly grow flowers. In food growing initiatives, the term community has become a pervasive adjective, such as community gardens, community kitchens, community assets, and so on. In its various forms, community is being constantly maintained, remade, often expanded. How does this happen? Through cooperative practices where people learn to trust each other, especially by sharing aims, skills, enthusiasms, inspirations, fears, and doubts. Here I'll describe some patterns that span the stories that have emerged from our course. In early 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted community food growing initiatives, while also revealing and intensifying the stark social inequalities in our society. People's social isolation prompted even greater interest than before in community food growing initiatives. From the spring 2021 course, the films describe participants' efforts to overcome social isolation by sustaining or even expanding community food initiatives, thus maintaining benefits such as health and well-being. Despite the COVID restrictions, participants got to know each other better and extended friendship networks across social differences of ethnicity, national origin, and age. While fulfilling their own needs, participants also felt they were doing socially useful activities, such as supplying food banks and learning skills for locally produced food. Cultivation skills were extended to homes, schools, and other spaces. These new social bonds were facilitated by what we call the people skills of key staff members and some volunteers who bring people together in congenial activities. For example, when the Cowthorpe Community Garden held an urban harvest festival, screening some of the films, they stimulated personal stories about a sense of group belonging. As many volunteers said, "We feel at home here." The autumn 2021 course went further. It sought to elicit deeper feelings and transformative potentials around community food growing, and the films did so. On the one hand, participants have experienced doubts about whether their food initiative could prevail over various obstacles, especially during the pandemic, thus potentially limiting people's commitments. On the other hand, many participants have brought hopes for rebuilding the future differently, both within and beyond their food initiative, as an inspiration for greater commitments, solidaristic bonds, and a food culture reconnecting people with the source of food. The films give an inside view of those processes, of how food growing initiatives have dealt with participants' difficulties and inspirations, how those experiences elicit feelings of attachment, firstly from the storytellers themselves, and then from those who have seen the films, such as at the Cowthorpe Project. Each in its own way, the initiative stimulated novel forms of community among diverse people who otherwise would not have met each other. In each initiative, common practices generated group engagements, built community bonds, enhanced cooperative skills, and envisaged collective contributions to a better future. Some initiatives had activities or impacts beyond community gardens, indicating a wider transformative potential. There's two very brief examples. In Haringey, the Wolf Lane site has multiple interdependent activities, in some ways analogous with an alternative food system providing livelihoods. As another example, a campaign of Cambridge community groups generated the George Street Garden Share, by contrast with a shared garden, as an informal neighborhood network where participants share everything except the growing spaces. For summaries of the stories, see our second insight page. During the COVID pandemic, many such initiatives have described themselves as building social resilience. This term has diverse meanings. On the one hand, it can mean filling in gaps in the dominant system, such as supplying food banks to alleviate food poverty, and so perhaps inadvertently helping that system to bounce back to its previous state, with all its destructive effects, both socially and environmentally. This is sometimes euphemistically called building back better, a favorite slogan of many governments, implicitly within the dominant agri-industrial food system. On the other hand, social resilience can mean stronger capacities and solidaristic bonds for building the future differently, beyond the dominant agri-industrial food system. So we could ask the question, how do storytellers help to inspire such different futures, and likewise inspire cooperative practices that can realize those futures? Well, hopefully these potential benefits and questions will attract you to watch the films, to learn the skills to make your own film, and to read our commentaries, such as this one, all available on the project website. Likewise, you could organize a group screening and discussion at your food initiative, as was done at the Calthorpe Community Garden. You may wonder about the processes that generated the films among the storytellers. That's what you will hear next. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for that, Lev. That was a tremendous foregrounding of how important this work is in seeking alternative lifestyles for us as we face the challenges that presently avail humanity. So we're going to have some insights now from one of the members of the Cobra collective. Juliet, please take it away.
Yes, cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm so happy to see so many of you here. It's really exciting, and I'm really happy to share sort of what we've learned in this past year working together with everyone, and to tell you a little bit more about sort of the approach that we've taken. So I'm going to share my screen with you. So in general, the kind of approach that we take in the Cobra Collective is called action research. So like, yes, we're academics, but we're really interested in doing something that actually makes a difference. And for that, we want to be, working together with the people who are directly doing that. So that's why we're working so closely with Sustain, with RISC, and with all the different sort of participants from the different food growing initiatives, because we're interested in, really producing some knowledge that actually makes a difference in real life. And sort of the way action research works, it's just this kind of continuous cycle of learning and questioning. So we have some questions about, how is community food growing helpful, and how can we help promote that, and what role does storytelling have, like all the questions that Les just explained to you. But then, we plan something that we think is a good idea to get closer to what's going on here. We do something, we watch out, what's happening, how is it working, we reflect on it, learn from the things that worked well, drop the things that didn't work so well, and do something new. So that's kind of the way we're working, and that's the way we've been working in this research project. So like Les already said, we had sort of 2 cohorts of storytellers we've been working with, and with every cohort we've been learning lots of new things and sort of changing our approach in response to that. And the way we've been doing our learning and sharing and teaching has been in 2 ways. So this is the online course that you've been hearing a lot about already. I mean, that's a screenshot of the course. We're going to put a link in the chat. And that course is sort of the baseline that covers all the different things that we've been sort of learning and teaching about community food growing, about storytelling, about all the technical elements of how do you tell a story. So that's all online and openly available for anyone. And we would love it if you're interested, if you can, go online, take a look, take the course, and give us some feedback for things that you found useful, other things that you would like to hear more about perhaps. And we're really keen to incorporate that in the 3rd and last iteration, the last cohort of storytellers that we're going to have next year in the spring. So that's one part, our online course. And then the other part is we have our live sessions with the storytellers. So those are the storytellers from our first cohort. But here the whole idea is that we have this sort of intensive program, I guess, in a way, over 2 months of really getting together on a Saturday morning for 2 hours, and having some time to really talk about it, because I think that's always really crucial to have a chance to actually, talk to other participants, share ideas for your stories while you're developing them. So that's the other part that the course has been, and where we've been getting lots of feedback and reflection, and it's been really great. And sort of the overall, I guess, insight that we've landed on for now that we're trying to promote is this idea of flourishing communities, by promoting community food growing through storytelling. And I'm gonna explain to you in a little bit more detail now what exactly we mean by that. So this whole idea of community flourishing, I think this comic kind of captures it really well. They're from Madeleine Seto, and I think that really captures this idea. So just thinking, can we imagine a way where we're all actually well, a community situation where we feel safe and cared for, there's enough for everyone to get by, and sort of enough for us not to just get by, but to actually, have a good life together and enjoy being together. Basically, that's the whole idea of community flourishing. And I think it's something that's really important to imagine, because I think often when we think about the future or the things we need, we think, okay, but what do we need to get by or to make it work? But the idea of flourishing is like, okay, but what does the good life look like for our community? How can we all be together and be well and sort of, live this ideal good life situation? So that's one part. The stories we want to tell in this project are about how can we create this type of community flourishing. And then the other sort of key concept about the type of stories that we want to tell are about radical hopefulness. So the whole idea with radical hopefulness is to tell stories that are rooted in sort of the presence, what is our present situation like, but that's thinking about community flourishing, like what type of future do I want to see, and what can I change, or what is happening here right now that helps to make this future a reality. And I think this comic also captures it quite well. So you see in the beginning, there's, it's kind of like what we have right now, I guess, early winter, things are gray and cold, and things are a little difficult. And it's really important to acknowledge the ways in which life can be difficult at times, and to acknowledge these sort of challenges that community food growing initiatives face. But we're going to take those challenges, acknowledge them, and then think about, okay, but how can we go towards the future? How can we imagine a different future that we want? So these aren't like necessarily positive stories, but just stories that really, I guess, accept what's happening in the moment right now, what's going on, and then take this with a thought towards, okay, and what do we want to see for the future? And these are the type of stories that we want to tell, and that we've been sort of inviting participants to tell in our project. And I want to go back a little bit now and think about, why are we using storytelling for this, overall? Why can't we just say what's important? And to do that, I'm going to also tell you a little story. Maybe you know the story already. It's the story of Frederick the mouse. It's a children's story. It's actually one of my favorite children's stories, but I think it captures the importance of storytelling really, really well, and how it can be helpful for a community. So in the story of Frederick the mouse, there is a bunch of mice that live together, and they're preparing for the winter. So you can see here, they're all, collecting different nuts and crops to, make sure they have food for the winter. But there's one mouse, little Frederick, who's not collecting anything, or so it seems. He's just sitting there and sort of, imagining or like capturing what's happening. And the other mice ask him, what are you doing? Why are you not helping us? What's going on here? And Frederick says, oh no, I am helping you. I'm remembering all the colors and the way the sun feels. And I'm, remembering stories that we're going to tell in the winter when it's cold. And the other mice are a little bit like grumbly, not quite sure if that's really useful. But then winter comes, all the nuts are eaten, everyone's very hungry, and they say, okay, now Frederick, here's your moment. What is it that you bring to this community? How, where are your stories? So you can see it here in the bottom picture. Frederick tells his stories. He describes what the sun feels like, what it was like during the summer, reminding everyone how nice it will be, and that even though things are really difficult right now, and everyone's very cold, and everyone's very hungry, but better times are going to come again. and everyone feels, of course, all the mice are happy, and it is really important to, to also get over the winter emotionally as well as having enough to eat. So that's the little story of Frederick the mouse, which, I think really brings out all these questions of, what are the different ways in which a community can work together to prepare for challenging times? What are the things that we need to collect, and how can we share that, both in terms of resources, but also in terms of stories, in terms of knowledge, in terms of connections and relationships? And what is the role of the storyteller in these difficult times, to not only, I guess, record what's happening and, give those stories on to the next generation, but also to help motivate us for the future and to help us get over the winter, like, emotionally. So that's why we think storytelling is really important, and is also a really good way of engaging with these really important things. And if you're interested in a little bit more of the sort of theoretical background behind this, there's this idea of the iceberg metaphor. So above the iceberg, above the water, is sort of the behavior that you can see from people in everyday life, the things we say and do. But then beneath that, there's much more, right? There's sort of our attitudes, our values, our sense of identity, and our, definition of our community. And I guess many of you are part of community food growing initiatives, so you'll know this so well, that there is so much in terms of how all these emotional elements really impact the way we, what forms a community and how do we work with other people, and all of these really crucial elements. And storytelling can be a way of sort of bringing out of, what are those different values, attitudes, what is important for us, how do we define our community. So storytelling can be a way to bring that out, to sort of bring it out in the open, but it can also reinforce it by still, when you tell and hear stories about your community, the idea of your community in your mind also becomes a bit more fixed. So that's just a little bit of theoretical background if you're interested in that. You can also just remember Frederick. That's also great. And the way we tell stories in our course, and you're going to see an example of that in a moment, is by using the whale template. So the idea of the whale is that when you tell a story, you start by setting the scene here, sort of at the bottom of the whale. You say, where, what's happening. Then you move up to the whale, to the big splash, the challenge. What's the tricky thing that you're working on? You kind of resolve some of the tension again by coming to some form of resolution. And then you have some, upwards and outwards ending that hopefully ends with a vision of community flourishing. So that's sort of a very basic template that you can use for telling a story, and that we've also given the sort of participants in our cohorts. And now I'm going to actually, in a moment, you're going to hear from Wendy, who was one of the participants in our second group. And she made you'll hear her story. I'm going to share her story next, the video that she created, and then you're going to hear from Wendy directly about her experience during the course and how she created her story. So I'm going to go ahead now and share her video.
We live in a big world with some big problems that can feel a bit out of our control. But in a small part of the North London borough of Barnet, a few people have come together to make a difference by growing food for their community. Thinking locally has helped us to change things within our reach. Come and have a look at what we've been up to over the last few years. Since starting Incredible Edible Barnet in 2016, our group has grown food in public places. We now grow outside a church in New Barnet. Like our sibling gardens in the Incredible Edible Network, we encourage passers-by to pick the food grown on our plot, and the volunteers get to eat the tasty treats too. When the COVID pandemic happened in 2020, we took on a temporary allotment to grow food for our local food banks. This was a way we could share our skills and time to provide fresh food for the vulnerable in our community, which we now continue to do with some dedicated salad beds at the church. One of the reasons we want to grow food in a public place is because we believe people have lost their relationship with food, where it comes from, and its impact on the planet. Our landscape includes too many places where food is grown intensively, but cities can offer great potential for growing a range of food whilst also supporting the natural world. Using spare land in our neighbourhood, we came together to show people what food looks and tastes like. We have had great fun growing together, and we know our garden brings joy to anyone who passes by, and even more to anyone who decides to get their hands dirty and wants to learn more about growing their own food. It's been really exciting to see more small spaces sprouting up across Barnet, London, the UK, and the rest of the world in the last few years, but let's keep going. Small spaces are abundant in our cities and don't take a lot of time or money to get going. If you've been thinking of starting a community food growing space, we can help. Joining with just a few people can make a big difference for your neighbourhood too, by growing fresh food to share that has 0 air miles, as well as being chemical and plastic free. These small changes really do add up.
Let us know if you want to start a community food growing space in your area. We would love to help you get up and growing.
So I'm going to stop sharing my screen just for a moment so you can see Wendy and she can introduce herself. Though I guess you know her already from the film, but anyways, so you can see her. And then I'm gonna share it again with your slides, Wendy, if you want.
Cool. Yeah, and I think I was going to use those slides as a bit of a crib, so please do feel free to put them back. But first of all, just to say hello to everyone. I've seen a couple of what I call sibling sites, incredible edible sites around the country are here, and also a couple of my course mates from the second round that I did of the Cobra Collective course in, I think it was September, October. I do encourage you to look at the link that Fee's put in with there to tell you the stories of the other videos, the other gardens. I don't think the videos are in there, so any of my course mates who are here who have links to their videos, do pop them in, because mine was just one example, and I think the beauty of this course was that loads of different stories came out and they all look completely different, and it was really interesting to see the end result of us all going through the same process but coming out with something different because we had different stories to tell. So if you can put those slides back up, Julia. I try to follow the whale template to tell my story about who I am and why I took part in the course. But so I'm Wendy. I started Incredible Edible Barnet a few years back, and it's evolved slowly because I realised my personal capacity is not huge and I need to manage what I can do. So I want to help other people grow, and that was one of the reasons that I wanted to make this video. I'm also a community manager for a small organisation, and both of those things, of running the garden and telling everyone about it and being this comms person in a small business, involve lots of communicating with lots of different people in lots of different ways. And social media has a huge part of that. I'm not a huge fan, it's quite time consuming, and there's a lot of negativity on there, but there is also a lot of positivity, and videos is becoming an increasingly larger part of that. Both for me, I want to watch videos, and I think lots of other people, the information says that people want to see videos to learn about what people's stories are rather than just text and photos. And there's no point in spending your time creating content if it's not what people want to engage with. So I put on a to-do list for myself several years ago, learned to make videos, where it promptly stayed months and months and months until I saw this course. It was too busy, I felt, in the spring to take it on, but I did sign up for the autumn course. And as I've said, one of the huge reasons for me to do it was because I wanted to learn to edit my own videos. So that might not be for everybody. I quite enjoyed that process, which is the little black box in the bottom right there. That was the software that we used, and we were talked through how to use it, and it was relatively easy to use. But if you didn't want to take part in that and you didn't want to do your own editing, there was help available. But I wanted to do that because I wanted to be able to carry on using that skill in the future. The first round of the course, from the information that I looked at in advance, seemed to be more about how people managed through the pandemic. But when I did the course, I wanted to think about more about the future and how we go into the future. So kind of coming out of the whale, the concluding, the outward and the upward. And I knew I wanted to make a video, and I knew I wanted to, it really helped it being about gardening rather than just learning to edit through for any other purpose. But I didn't really know what I wanted my story to be about. So coming on the course really helped me figure that out. It was about telling a positive story of growing with and for others during and before the pandemic, and sharing it in a more interesting way. But it wasn't really until we kind of went through the iceberg process that Julia just showed a slide for, where that helped me create my story narrative. And we went through looking at the steps, thinking about, and the behaviour that we discussed was how to community garden. So we focused all the discussion around community garden and looked at the behaviours and the attitudes and the identities and the values around that. And just my answers to those questions helped me create this video and tell this story that I didn't even really know that I wanted to tell that. So it was a really great process to go through. And then we looked at the whale side here to look at how to structure everything. And then that, for me, put my story into the right order. So I had loads of notes and loads of different ideas in my head, but going through this whale process helped me create the right order for the story. We looked at some things to do with light and sound and framing, which I think we're going to look at in a moment. And we had a little bit of homework in the first week to create the photo story based on what we'd already discussed. And if you could just go to the next slide for me, that was the photo story that I came up with. Some of it was based on photos I already had. I didn't really go out and take new pictures because I think we had a week to do this one. So it was encouraging you to keep moving and keep going. You know, we all have so many things on our to-do list. I could have just sat on this and gone, oh, that's great, yeah, I'll do that one day. But because I had a deadline, it made me think about it. And I came up with this rough story plan, which in week 2, we talked about it together a bit more. And then the end result, the homework after week 2, was to create a very short video to get used to using the software, thinking about the script that went underneath it, and put the photos to life, basically. And we then came back, I think, in weeks 3 and 4, and if we were comfortable, we showed it to our group and we got some feedback, which I found quite useful to fine-tune what I was wanting to say. So yeah, overall, I wanted to learn to edit. I did learn to edit. I've since used it at work, so my boss is quite pleased. And this was the first video that I'd made, really, so I was quite pleased with the results. So now it's onto what I do next, and I'm not sure what that is yet, but it's more garden storytelling, hopefully. I also learned how to tell better stories, so kind of going through that iceberg and whale process really kind of slotted everything in together for me. And I also, I don't know if the other guys on the course with me do this, but when I watch other people's videos now, I'm kind of analysing them, going, right, okay, how did they edit that? How did they make that? What sound have they used? So it makes you think about things in different ways too. I love the positivity of the programme, and I love the group that we had was really positive and really, really friendly. And I also thought it was quite good to acknowledge the negatives. I think Julia mentioned this, that's why I started the video of, there are negatives, we're surrounded by negatives, but small actions, and there are ways to make things more positive. And so telling those stories and sharing them with people is the positive that comes out of the negative. My one tip, apart from signing up to do the course, it would be really good, is if it's not for you right now, take photos and record videos of whenever you can, because you never know when you're going to need it. And It was a little bit hard doing the course in autumn because things didn't look as nice as they might have done in the spring, but I was able to use a couple of the pictures and a couple of the videos that I'd had from earlier in the year to make it a bit more sunny and a bit less autumny. So yeah, sign up in the spring and you'll have lots of lovely gardens to take pictures of. That's me.
Wonderful. Thanks, Wendy. We have 10 minutes now for any questions. So if you'd like to drop any in the chat, I've just received one from Tony. Yeah, anybody else, please feel free to drop them in the text. Any questions for Wendy or Julia? We will, after this, we'll be going into a brief how-to session where we'll look at some skills about digital storytelling, and then at the end we're going to convene a panel where there'll be another opportunity to ask questions of everybody. So if you'd like to direct any questions to Julia or Wendy now, that would be great. I see one from Tony. Got to find it. I believe it was about cost. Yeah. Oh yeah. So how much does the course cost? And
it's free.
Yeah.
It's free because it's part of our research project, so there's no cost at all. It's free. Yes.
You can thank the Arts and Humanities Research Council.
And there's the third cohort to take part in the digital storytelling process that Wendy took part in. Are you taking applicants for that?
So we will be for the spring. We don't have our dates yet, but we will be taking them. I guess in a couple of months we'll have sort of the dates for when that will take place, and there'll be a form that we'll send around and you can just fill out. So yeah.
I've got another question from Diane. Is it mostly online? So could you explore the distinction between the online and the live courses?
Yeah, so the online course is there's no people, right? It's a self-study course. So it's a written course that you engage with, and there's some questions that you reflect on, but you sort of do that by yourself. Now the two cohorts, we also had online sessions, but they were live, like they were Zoom sessions with all of us talking together. We would really like to explore maybe having something in person in the future, but we don't know yet with the COVID regulations how it's going to be. So we wanted to be able to do it all online in case, so that's why we came up with this system. But hopefully there will be something in person in the spring, but we're not sure yet. Great.
And could you say who the course is for? I've got a question from Rebecca asking, can community growing coordinators take part? I imagine yes, very much so.
Yeah, it's for sort of anyone who is interested. We would, I think, particularly encourage people we just want to hear different stories, right? Like community gardens are a very different thing. There are lots of different groups of people who take part, and we would really love to hear from different people taking part, and especially also hearing stories from maybe more sort of marginalized community members or group. We really want to find ways to support people to tell their stories. So also what we especially want to encourage is maybe if you're a garden coordinator to take part and maybe also help tell those stories of maybe more marginalized people in your community. That's something we just really want to support.
Great. Speaking of more marginalized people, will there be will you cover putting subtitles on videos?
So we have one video that sort of it's in Spanish actually, but the sort of participant just did that themselves. In terms of subtitles, I think it really depends on each storyteller, sort of what, how or where they would like it to be translated. I don't know, Andrea, if you would like to add something to that. I feel like you look ready to.
Yes, absolutely. So it's very easy to put subtitles in technically, but it's incredibly time consuming. So if you do have the motivation and the time, it can easily be done.
Perhaps you can if anyone has any specific technical questions in the process of going through the course, maybe they can get in contact with you. Would that be correct?
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of my email is the one you'll find on all our Cobra Collective websites. So you can email me. I'm very happy to talk to you about anything related to this.
Great. Another question from Diane. Could you talk about, is there any homework? Are there deadlines? How does that work?
Yeah, so there is homework and there are deadlines. The idea is for both the homework and the deadlines to encourage you to actually do something, because like Wendy said, it's so easy to think, oh, I'm going to do something when it's the nice, right moment. They're not meant to exclude people, right? You can always come, even if you haven't done the homework and you've missed all the deadline. That's, we're always happy to see you and to talk about your ideas. So they're not exclusionary deadline and homework, just gently motivators for you to just try something, and they're sort of purposefully put quite tight, so there's not time to make it perfect, and that's on purpose, right? It's so easily to get obsessed if we have to do the perfect thing, but we just want to encourage people to do something, and then we can talk about it together.
There's a question here about what the course is designed for. Is it for funding or social media? Perhaps you can share your thoughts, but I think that would be a great question for the panelists as well. If you've got any thoughts briefly now, Julia.
Yeah, I think it's really more about the stories that are important for people. So of course we can make videos that are targeted for funders or for sort of recruiting, but the stories that we were interested in telling are really more about what's really important for the people in the initiatives, like what Wendy said, what is important for your sense of community or belonging. So yes, they can be tailored for sort of those more, purposes to be used in that way, but that's not really our purpose. We're really more interested in, giving people the capacity to tell stories that are meaningful for you. You can always use those skills then to create a great funding video or a great recruitment video. But it's really more those personal stories that we would like to encourage.
Great.
But it's always up to you. You join the course, you choose what your story is going to be about. So.
I realized I only asked half of Katie's previous question about subtitles. She's also asking about, is it possible to put an interpreter in a box next to a video for deaf viewers, audio impaired viewers?
Okay, maybe I can jump in there.
Yeah, please do.
So Video has got pretty basic functionality, which has its advantages that people don't get lost through it. But there is another software tool, open source, which is called Openshot Studio. So we don't do training in Openshot, but I guess once you've learned the basics in Video, you can take those basic skills to Openshot, and then you can, put additional video inserts with a sign language interpreter into that. But we don't specifically, we've only got 4 2-hour sessions to do all the training, and we need to cater for a whole range of digital skills. So, we have to do a compromise a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone can hear me, but I'm having problems actually finding the typing box to type a question. So can I just ask a question directly like this? Is that okay?
Go ahead. Yeah, please do.
Yeah. I was wondering how much the timing of the course, is it over a period of like a month or 2 months, and also how many hours would be in the course itself? What's the structure of the delivery, I suppose I'm wanting to know.
Yes, so the course it's about sort of 2 months. There's 4 sessions. That's sort of the thing we have fixed. We're still experimenting a little bit with the timing between the sessions and how much time is good for people to have in between to do the homework. That's something we've also changed a lot from the first group to the second. And that's something I think we just need to talk about again, how we're going to do it best for the third group. But it should be about sort of 30 hours, I think, in terms of the live sessions and the time it's probably going to take you to, record your videos and do some editing. So about 30 hours for 2 months. But it's also quite open. I mean, we also had some people who joined some of the sessions who did not have the capacity to actually sort of, make the video, or were maybe not as interested in doing that. That's also fine, like it's not a you're in or you're out. I mean, yes, the best case, what we want to encourage is people to sign on and do the whole thing with us and do a video. That's great. But we're also happy for people to join in other capacities.
Super. I've got 2 questions about alternative storytelling formats. One which is more about alternative software, but also about like integrating text, video, audio. How do the videos develop, and how many different kind of visual or audio formats do you use, or are people taught to use?
So I think we put the link in the chat. The best thing is if you just actually check out the films that we've made, because you'll see there's a very big difference in sort of the first group and the second group. In the first group, we kind of mostly use like the same template, but in the second group, every film is sort of completely different. We have one that's much more like a poem, actually. It's sort of a visually illustrated poem. Then we have Wendy's film, which is sort of very, almost like a little like more sort of very informative and about her personal story. We have one that's more like a little documentary, really, and one that actually is using more sort of graphics and sort of not photos actually to tell the story. So they're hugely different. And we have this sort of suggested template that you can use, but then whatever other ideas you come up with, we're really happy to support you with that as well.
Fantastic. I think that's all of the questions, unless I've missed any. I think that's all the questions I can see. So I think it would be a good opportunity now to move on to the basic digital how-to. So I believe your Andrea is going to cover some of the basic skills that you might learn and do a bit of a demonstration. So Andrea, over to you.
Great, thank you, Richard. Apologies if my internet connection comes and goes. I am actually in Guyana on my way to work with Indigenous communities for their digital storytelling and community mapping. So Julia is going to jump in if I disappear suddenly. So Julia, if you can share the slides. So yes, we have these 4 2-hour sessions, and what we have structured is like a basic sequence to build up your skills. So the very first step is, what kind of equipment will you need? We're trying to, so really, if you have a mobile phone, you're in, you can do your digital stories. To improve the quality of the photographs and the videos, if we do suggest getting a accessible tripod. They're about £15, and to improve the quality of the audio, we're also suggesting getting a clip-on microphone, which is also about £15–20. So that's it. That's all you need in terms of equipment. If you have a mobile phone, you can create your video, and then these extra pieces of kit will also help. So right, you've got your kit. Very first step, if we go to the next slide, Julia, we've got to focus on technique. So the very first training session is very much looking at lighting. So here you see issues with too much contrast, with a backlit person. So we focus on the lighting techniques. Then if we go on to the next slide, you'll see that we also focus on the angle in which the photographs are taken. They mean different things. If you're doing an interview, it's good to be a head height. Taking different angles, people, become distorted. So they can also be used if you want to take more of a background overview of the situation. So we really need people to start thinking about how you're pointing your phone at light, at angles, and then the next slide, we're getting more interesting in terms of the actual content, right? So we go through different framing techniques. When you first introduce your story, it's good to take a long shot or a panoramic. You set the scene with these two framing techniques. Then if you start introducing the characters, a total body shot is useful. And then when you start going into the detail of the story, you present the challenges, people's emotions. You want to close up to their faces, maybe with a headshot or a close-up, or describe, you know, the techniques that you're using. Then you go into a very close-up. So we go through all these framing techniques, and then we talk about composition. So that's just taking a photograph, right? That's in the very first session, how you take the photograph. Yes, Julia, you were right. It's the next slide. From these photographs, we start thinking about, okay, how do you weave a captivating visual story? But let's not start running before we can walk. Let's put together a photo story, which is essentially a collection of photographs that tell a story, right? So you storyboard your idea, you go out, you collect your photographs, and you weave them together. And here you can see, this is with the indigenous community that I work here in Guyana. They are introducing indigenous cotton farming. So you take a long shot to set the scene where the house is situated in the savannah. Then you start zooming in to the cotton farm location, and then specific actions. And there's a little bit of text, but really we're focusing on the visual communications here. That is by session 2. The homework is to present a photo story. We provide feedback on how your technique went and how you felt in applying the community flourishing and the radical hopefulness concept in telling your photographic story. And then only then do we go into the videoing. Right? So for the videoing, we have actually, this is in the second cohort, we have actually subscribed to an online video editing tool. So you don't actually have to download any video editing software on any machine. All you need is internet connection, a browser, you upload your video clips, and we'll support you in editing these clips and weaving them together, adding audio, adding titles. Like I think Miranda said, if you want to, create other outputs for other media, maybe smaller clips that can be exported into other platforms. So really, this is where we arrive at with the course. And so you will see that there is a whole range of videos that participants have produced. That's their end product. Crucially, we're now supporting people with the online course. So it's like your experiences of the live courses with us. We encourage people to access this online course, see how it's helped them, with extra ideas, extra skills, and your experiences feed directly back into this online course. So initially in the first cohort, we had a lot of examples from the indigenous communities that we work with, but now we're replacing the audiovisual examples with assets from the first and the second cohort, and we're also improving the content. So this is the action learning cycle that Julie presented, where it's not a top-down thing, we know best, we're going to tell you what to do. It's actually a dialogue with all participants, and you tell us where your difficulties have been, what you'd like to be improved, and that feeds directly back into this online course, which you yourselves can download, copy and paste, chop and change. All of our outputs are open. They're all under the Creative Commons license, including the videos that people produce, which means that you can reuse them, you can put them in other places as long as they're not used for commercial purposes and they're used to promote community food growing. We really encourage you to do that. So yeah, this is in a nutshell how our training works.
Thanks, Andrea. That was really comprehensive. I have a few questions to clarify from what you're saying. First question from Tony. She mentioned that schools often have safeguarding policies that make the use of mobile phones problematic. Have you got any alternative solutions for the image capture? What would you suggest in that situation?
Absolutely. This is a very common question and issue that we have with digital storytelling within communities, that, you know, unless you have the permission of the school leadership or parents, we don't encourage people to put pictures of their children in the videos. However, there is a clever workaround, which you know, even tackling difficult subjects or moments that you haven't been able to capture because of the season, we're very happy for you to integrate drawn sketches or animations. There are lots of online tools now that allow you to do simple animations. So this is an alternative, and we can make them quite exciting. You know, a very rough sketch, you can make it move across the screen. You can zoom into a person, so that makes it a lot more dynamic. So yes, there are workarounds to issues like representing children or difficult subjects.
Yeah, a question from Rebecca. If you already know technically how to produce a video, what would you gain from participating in this course?
Yes, so it is very much the point that you can then focus on the storytelling. You know, there is in a way the live 2-hour sessions, the way they're balanced is that half of them are focused on the story that you're telling, and then the other half is focused on the technique. So and you know, there is nothing stopping you if you are already familiar, like Wendy said, that other participants were already familiar with video editing software and they used iMovie or other tools like that. There's nothing stopping you from using this more advanced software. But yes, we do focus half of our effort on your actual story. What is it that you're trying to communicate, you know, about community flourishing and radical hopefulness? That is challenging. That is very challenging. So yes, we do put a lot of effort into that.
Yeah.
Also, maybe if I can just add something, I think hopefully also interacting with the other participants, like, you know, our sessions aren't, I'm going to teach you this, like, yeah, there is usually a small part where me or Andrea or someone else gives sort of a little introduction, but then the rest of the session is just a conversation between all of us. And last course, we were normally, you know, like around 10 people or a little bit more during the course. So you can really, you know, talk to each other, hear about other people's stories and experiences. And I mean, I'm not a participant, so I, you know, can't speak for people, but it seemed like there was a lot of stuff that came out of those conversations and hearing. I see Suzanne nodding, who was also there. So I'm going to say yes, that might also be a good reason to join.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point. You almost get as much or more from sharing your experiences and stories with the participants than interacting with us, the facilitators.
Yeah, and especially in the context of those themes that you introduced, community flourishing and radical hopefulness, those are both so relevant for community gardening. I suppose it's a great way to explore the meaning of community gardening, like you were saying, Julia, kind of developing a shared narrative. I have one person's asking about the link that you need to use to sign up for the course. I presume this is the online Open University course, the grassroots storytelling one. Can we share that in the chat, please?
Yeah, we can. So the way it works is you can always just, if you click on the link, you can see the whole course. If you log in, then you can also write to us. So there's some parts where you can sort of answer questions and give us feedback in the course. So for that, you need an account, and which is also, of course, free to make. And we would actually love it if you can go in and leave us some feedback. so we know how to improve it for the next iteration.
Great. So I think that's the end of the technical Q&A for Andrea. I'd like to invite the rest of the speakers back, and if anyone has any general questions about this project, about the value of digital storytelling, how it sits in the context of building alternative flourishing futures, please, yeah, I'd really like to have an expansive conversation if anyone wants to. We don't have any questions yet, so if you would like to put your mic on and even your video, then that's an option at the moment.
Richard, I just have something to share, if that's possible for me to do so.
Yeah, please, please.
It's a bit too long to put in the chat. So I was just reflecting as we were listening to Andrea and then Julia again. Another way I have found really useful to use the films, and I'm kind of speaking on behalf of a garden that is part of our network, Capital Growth, that isn't here today, but Calthorpe Community Garden hosted a really interesting event back in September, where they screened some of the earlier films from the first cohort of the project as a means to stimulate some discussion amongst the garden users, so existing garden users at Calthorpe Community Garden. And I was lucky to be there on the day, and so was Les, and it was just really interesting. So that wasn't an example of them taking part in the course or making their own film, but actually viewing the films together, and then kind of those films and experiences and storytelling from others in other community gardens kind of helping to trigger conversations about the experience of volunteers and participants at Calthorpe. So I'm really just mentioning this because I think it's a really, you know, if people don't have the time and capacity, like Wendy mentioned earlier, to make their own films, there could also be some real value, not just in watching the films on your own, but to watch them with other people that you're involved with in your growing projects.
Yes, I just put the link to my report on that event into the chat, so you'll see what it was like and how you could do something similar. Of course, at this time of year, you will need an indoor space.
I have a question here. It says, do you have to be doing a community growing community growing project to join the course? This individual supports a network of groups, some of whom are growing, others are doing community fridge repair cafes. So part of a constellation of alternative building projects. Are they welcome in the course?
I'm like looking at Andrea, whoever is going to speak. I would say yes. I don't know if you're going to say something else, Andrea. I would say yes, because I think it's part of this bigger idea of building the future differently. And I think, I guess officially it is important that maybe there is some sort of community garden element to what we do, because that is officially what we do. But I think there's always opportunity to include, you know, other stories in that, or to think about sort of the wider system. No, Andrea, what do you think?
Absolutely. Well, there is the beauty of online courses and even the live sessions is that there's really no limit to how many participants you can have. Obviously, we want interaction, and but I think we can easily accommodate additional people, and community food growing does branch out into so many areas and so many fields. So it's actually would be very stimulating to see if we could apply concepts like flourishing and hopefulness to other areas and see where the overlaps are with community food growing. So I'd be very interested, yeah.
Yes, and the similar processes apply as well to many other parts of the voluntary sector, which combines some paid staff with people skills, as I call it, with a wide range of voluntary contributions, all dependent on really people feeling inspired by the relationships they develop. So the processes described in the film so far are relevant to a much wider range of activities, and all such people are welcome in the course.
Yeah. There's a question here from Greg, who's asking for any tips on sharing or promoting your videos. Wendy, would you like to reflect on that? How did you circulate your videos?
Yeah, I can do. So I don't know if it showed on the clip that Julia played, but that was actually the second iteration of my film, because I had a spelling error in my first. Note to self, check spelling, and it was of the garden that I volunteer at, so I was quite annoyed that I spelled that wrong. So I'm probably at about 120 views on YouTube, which is quite good. I think it could be better. I have just put it on social media, and I asked a couple of people to share it for me, and it's sitting at I've pinned it to the top of my pages. I think I don't actively go out and push stuff that I'm doing. I want people who want to engage with me to know what I've been up to, because it's quite difficult to reach new people, especially on social media. I have a personal belief that we shouldn't need to be paying for these things, so I never pay to advertise. Everything I do is voluntary, and I have no money, so why would I pay a social media company with loads of money to do something when I don't have any? So we can't reach everyone, I think, is the difficult answer to the question. So sharing in groups, sharing with other gardens, asking them to help you out, and gradually chipping away, and then the people who need to find you will find you. I'm quite a believer in that.
I think if it's okay to add something, that's also, I think, part of what we want to do with this project is also really, connect RISC and Sustain and other communities, and sort of help share through each other's networks. I think we really want to take this as an opportunity to sort of, and with social farms and gardens as well, to sort of bring, everyone more together and help each other share our things through various channels.
And to add to that, sorry, Richard, the Cobra Collective has created this showcase platform on Vimeo, where we're gradually building up all the wonderful videos that everybody's producing. So it's almost like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, because we're creating a critical mass of amazing videos, and it's becoming a hub of where people can just browse and become inspired. So it's just wonderful to see what's happening with that platform.
That's great, and that's roughly answered what I was going to ask, is there somewhere where the alumni of this course can kind of convene? But that sounds like a really appropriate place where they can share the final product of what they've done, and everyone can kind of share in the pride of what they produced.
I think on the alumni note, actually, just another of our sort of participants is also here today, and she just sent me a message as well saying, oh, let's think about setting up an alumni network. So I think that would be really great. And it's also something like, we're keen for this project to really do it together. So if you have ideas, if you've been a participant or you're going to become one, we're really keen to make space for that, and happy for new ideas like that to come up as well.
Great. Are there any questions that I've missed? I'm just going through. I think we've heard from everybody. In which case, I'm going to close with a few reflections of my own. So I work for a charity called Social Farms and Gardens, and we work across the nation, but in London we work with between our member organisations, growing organisations in the city, and this project is enormously helpful for all of the projects that I work with, because the chief challenge for community projects is always engagement, is to communicate the value of what you're doing, not only to funders and councils, but also to potential participants, because without community engagement, community gardening it becomes exclusive and problematic. And so creating ways in which we can share the work that we're doing in a way that invites people in enormously enormously helpful and enormously powerful. It's really hopeful. It's really inspiring to hear of the frameworks within which this work is being done. We all know the challenges we're facing collectively. Climate change is an imminent threat. Biodiversity loss is an imminent threat. The health challenges of living in an urban environment are manifold and to some extent increasing. And the wonderful thing about community food growing is that it touches all of these. Connecting people with the food system naturally connects people with nature and gives people an opportunity to participate in an optimistic future. And that, to me, and I'm sure this is foundational to all of the work that the leaders of this project have been doing. Optimism is necessary. We need to be able to have hopeful futures. We can't do all of this off of fear. And so thanks very much to Sustain and the Cobra Collective and RISC and all of those involved for inviting me to chair this. I've learned a huge amount. Thanks everybody for joining us. I've really appreciated your questions, and they've helped us explore what's on offer in this project in a great amount of detail. And thanks to all of those who participated and presented. It's been a terrific webinar, and all the best to you.
Thank you so much, Richard, for chairing and sharing. And Maya and I will be sure to send a link to the recording following today's webinar with lots of links and a copy of the slides and the videos, everything that's been in the chat as well, so that you've all got it handy.
Thank you, bless you all.
Many thanks.
Can we circulate it more widely?